So I come from the Weizmann Institute in Israel, and I play a role both in heading a lab that looks at the age of the Anthropocene, the current age of us humanity affecting the globe from a quantitative perspective, as part of my work in the Department of Plant and Environmental Sciences. And at the same time, I'm the Dean of Education. And so this complex conversation, strikes me in different angles. And I was really happy to hear the first comment in the beginning about the importance of personal resilience, which I feel for me is, I really resonate with that, because many of the challenges we're talking about are really overwhelming for me. And on the one hand, I would think, I should, because I care so much about these things, all I should do is like try to work as hard as I can in order to solve them. But at the same time, I found that like this morning, the best thing for me was actually to drive, even though we're under lockdown, I could get out for like 10 minutes away from my house, because it's the time where there's beautiful lawns of wildflowers this time of the year, close to my hometown, and then work and on my phone and on my laptop within that location. And I find that that's what creates for me the creativity, and as well as the energy in order to work on many of those questions that could be really overwhelming, and there's so many disciplines. And so I guess one take home message is like learning happens in different ways, and you shouldn't necessarily follow some dictum that you have to do it in one specific way, in one specific place, from a specific person. You should explore with yourself, do the research upon yourself, and see where you're creative, and whatever works for you is usually fine. You don't need to feel like there's necessarily one way to do that. And then I want to go to something that might sound a bit like a paradox. On the one hand, I also connected to the fact that the emphasis that was put on emotional learning on the one hand, and knowing that that's super important, and the social aspects of that. And at the same time, the lens that I find that I find that really helps me, and I think is important, is the quantitative lens. I find that many of the questions that we have to face and to deal with and to communicate about just do not resolve, or do not bring even good communication, when you think in a dichotomous manner, in black and white. There's a tendency to think about black and white, whether, I don't know, nuclear energy is good or nuclear energy is bad, whether solar energy is only good or only bad, or whether natural gas is only good or only bad. And I just gave examples from the issue of energy generation, but of course that holds true for many, many different things, and it could relate to our food, and could relate to anything else. And there I feel that unfortunately we live in a complex world where there's many, many different trade-offs, and the picture is complicated for different angles, for different people with different interests, with different angles. And it doesn't solve the problem to be quantitative, but it is a necessary tool. And it might sound like a contradiction between the emphasis on the emotional part, but I think there's no way, no alternative, just like there's no dichotomy in terms of, good and bad, and black and white. Also, in terms of the tools that we need to bring, the emotions are important and the quantitative aspects are important. And I think in terms of the education that we need to bring about, also deals with being able to deal, say, orders of magnitude better, and being able to do quantitative comparisons, and to look at trade-offs in ways that are fine-grained in that sense. And so the thing that, for example, some of the examples we were interested in was like quantifying the impacts of the food that we choose to eat, and the importance of our diet. And there, instead of just saying something is good or something is bad, really trying to find what is the cost, say, of the things that you choose to eat, say, for a given amount of calories or a given amount of protein. What is the cost of choosing between, say, beef and chicken, milk, eggs, plant-based products that will give you the same nutritional value, but what does it mean in terms of the land resources used, the water used, the greenhouse gas emissions? And there's no way around, I think, trying to put numbers around behind those things. And the results might be surprising. In the end, you find that actually, say beef and chicken are very, very different. Beef is way, way worse. And then, for example, milk that, to some people might look harmless, it turns out is just as costly in terms of environmental impacts as, for example, chicken, even though milk, could be marketed as something, very different. And so all those things require, quantitative thinking and not just black and white answers. That's one example. The other deals with trying to get a holistic picture on the challenges of biomass and population loss around the world. And there we did like a survey of the global distribution of biomass around the world. A problem that many people, when the students started working on it, they didn't understand why do we need it, and if it's just completely impossible. But if you think with the right frame of mind that you're saying, I'm just trying to get the best possible integration and holistic view, you found out that you can do that. And then just now I had the message that that's what now Boris Johnson is citing when he wants to talk about these things. So numbers tell things to different people that might otherwise have not chosen to discuss those subjects, but they frame in a way that some people find very, very helpful. So that's another example. And the one thing before I finish up is like this effort that we did once we finished this analysis of the biomass on Earth. We said, oh, we're living in this very interesting period of time, also very lucky in many ways, that like there's so many things that we could enjoy as humans, but the mass of those things is accumulating very rapidly. The cars, the houses, the cell phones, all of that. And we started comparing the living mass, the biomass, to this anthropogenic mass, the mass of human-made things. So one is kind of like stable or even deteriorating, much because of our effects, and the other, the human-made mass, is expanding, very, very quickly. So when there's a graph that's roughly constant and something that's rapidly increasing, there's a point in time in which they intersect, a point in time in which we'll find there's more things on Earth that are human-made than all the living things combined. And we ask ourselves, when would that happen? And the result that we got is, and was published just in Nature just this December, is 2020. So we are just at the cusp of that transition, that point in time, where we're transitioning to the fact that there are more human-made things than all the living things on Earth. And I think this sort of alternative ways of thinking about it, I think, can maybe combine between the emotional and the quantitative in a way that I think is important. I think should be part of the education for the challenges that we're talking about. I think you often get what you measure. What you measure drives what you get. So it was mentioned here in terms of grades and whether that brings us to the radical collaboration that we're looking for. It was mentioned about GDP versus alternatives that we are interested in. It was mentioned about whether we do or do not have a carbon tax. So I think all of those elements really shape what we'll be getting. And I also, the other thing I wanted to resonate with is about the gratefulness and the gratitude. So I think we should recognize that the fact that there's like 7.7 billion people on Earth, that many of them do have a good quality of life, means that, there's a lot to be thankful for. And at the same time, we should understand we have no way to bring back the wheel completely. Like there are prices that are being paid by the fact that there's many people who are enjoying many things in their life and world. And in that sense, I think it would create an emotional problem if we think that we could not pay any price. There are prices that have to be paid, and we are also enjoying many things at the same time. So we need to just find how to minimize the penalties, how to find the best possible balance within that. And I think that's a more realistic point of view, and one that would ensure that we actually don't get burnt out, but rather find some sort of a better balance.